Imagine a world where every single human being was attracted to both men and women. On paper, the biological maths looks absolutely brilliant. Finding a partner would be infinitely easier. Reproduction would still be completely viable. Entire populations would instantly double their pool of potential mates, maximizing the genetic diversity of the tribe. So, why didn't evolution produce that outcome? If natural selection is a hyper-efficient machine designed to maximize mating opportunities, why are human beings so vastly different in who we are attracted to? The answer to that question has stumped biologists for a century. And it turns out to reveal something completely unexpected about how human evolution actually works. Now, before we look at the data, we need to set some ground rules. Human sexuality is one of the most complex, heavily debated topics on the planet. But today, we aren't looking at this through the lens of philosophy, sociology, or modern politics. We are looking strictly at the hard biological receipts. We are going to examine what current evolutionary biology, genetics, and developmental research can actually tell us, and, just as importantly, what they cannot tell us. We are going to separate the established biological facts from the cutting-edge evolutionary hypotheses. So, if we want to know why evolution didn't just make a blanket, one-size-fits-all sexuality for the entire human race, we have to start by looking under the hood at how our DNA actually builds us. For decades, the media was absolutely obsessed with finding the gay gene or the straight gene. The assumption was that human attraction was like a biological light switch. Flip it one way, you're strictly heterosexual. Flip it the other, you're strictly homosexual. Put it in the middle, you're bisexual. But modern genetics has completely dismantled that idea. In 2019, one of the largest genetic studies ever conducted on human sexual behavior was published in the journal Science. They analyzed the DNA of nearly 500,000 people. And what they found completely destroyed the light switch theory. There is no single gene that dictates who you are attracted to. Instead, human attraction is what biologists call a polygenic trait. Think of it like human height or eye color. Your height isn't controlled by one single tall gene. It is the result of thousands of tiny genetic markers interacting with each other, combined with your environment, your nutrition, and your childhood development. The 2019 study proved that sexual attraction works the exact same way. It is influenced by a massive, incredibly complex symphony of thousands of genetic variants across your entire genome. And, biologically speaking, whenever a trait is polygenic, evolution never produces just one outcome. Because thousands of genes are shuffling and combining in billions of different ways, biology inherently produces a massive spectrum of variations. Evolution doesn't like uniformity. Uniformity is dangerous. If an entire species is genetically identical and a new virus comes along, the entire species gets wiped out. Evolution survives through variation. So, from a purely genetic standpoint, evolution didn't make everyone bisexual for the exact same reason it didn't make everyone exactly 5'9" with brown hair and O-positive blood. The sheer mathematical complexity of human DNA naturally guarantees a diverse spectrum of human attraction. But that brings us to the second half of the paradox. If human genetics naturally produces a wide spectrum of fluid attraction, why did exclusive heterosexuality become the overwhelming statistical majority? Why isn't the population split evenly down the middle? That is where we have to leave the established genetics and look at the most fascinating, heavily debated hypothesis in modern evolutionary biology: the tipping point. To understand this model, we have to look at the brutal mathematics of early human survival. Every single population on Earth has a hard biological ceiling. To maintain a population, just to stop a tribe from going extinct, you need a replacement rate of roughly 2.1 children per female. Today, hitting that number is relatively easy. but 300,000 years ago on the African savanna, dodging predators, famine, and disease. The infant mortality rate was astronomical. Evolutionary biologists hypothesize that early humans were trapped in an extreme demographic bottleneck. If a tribe's mating energy shifted too far toward non-reproductive pairings, the birth rate would plummet below that survival threshold. The tribe shrinks, loses its defensive numbers, and eventually gets wiped out by a rival group or a harsh winter. So, under this hypothesis, exclusive heterosexuality didn't become the global majority because it is biologically superior. It became the dominant trait because it is a mathematical load-bearing necessity. It had to be the statistical baseline just to keep the sheer numbers of the human race above the extinction line. But this creates a massive biological paradox. If evolution needed to maximize baby making to survive the Pleistocene era, why didn't it use natural selection to delete non-exclusive attraction completely? Why keep it in the gene pool at all? This brings us to the cooperative advantage model, better known in biology as the social glue hypothesis. For a long time, science assumed that natural selection was a solo game. You maximize your own offspring or you lose. But humans are highly social primates. We survive as a squad. And to understand how a squad survives, we have to look at our closest genetic cousins, chimpanzees and bonobos. We share roughly 99% of our DNA with both species, but their societies operate in completely opposite ways. When chimps have a political dispute, they tear each other apart. When bonobos have a dispute over food or territory, they use fluid, non-exclusive sexual behavior to diffuse the tension. It acts like a biological handshake. It builds empathy, reinforces alliances, and stops the troop from fracturing. For years, anthropologists theorized that ancient humans utilized a similar mechanism. But in 2026, researchers took this from a theory to a mathematical model. Using advanced AI behavioral tracking on thousands of hours of wild primate footage, researchers mapped the social networks of macaques. The AI definitively proved that troops with higher rates of fluid, sociosexual bonding had drastically lower rates of group fracturing. The AI literally quantified the survival advantage. Groups with fluid behavior survived longer and adapted to environmental stress better than rigidly aggressive groups. When you combine the tipping point math with the social glue hypothesis, you get a brilliant picture of how evolution actually solves problems. Evolution acts like a biological thermostat, a process called stabilizing selection. It couldn't make 100% of the human population bisexual because the replacement birth rate would crash and the tribe would die. But it couldn't make 100% of the population strictly heterosexual either, because the tribe would lose all of that crucial social cohesion, alliance building, and conflict resolution. So, evolution struck a grand compromise. It hardwired exclusive heterosexuality as the statistical majority to satisfy the ruthless math of population replacement. But because human attraction is a highly complex polygenic trait, it naturally maintained a permanent, vital spectrum of fluid and non-exclusive individuals. This demographic became a biological insurance policy, small enough in number that the population continued to grow, but functionally significant enough to provide the cooperative advantage that human societies desperately needed to survive. So, what does this mean for us today? For 99% of human history, that strict population math governed everything we did. But today, through agriculture, modern medicine, and technology, we have utterly dismantled the brutal survival bottlenecks of the Pleistocene era. The pressure is off, and behavioral biologists argue that human brains possess incredible neuroplasticity. We adapt our bonding patterns to our environments. When you remove the strict, lethal survival pressures of the ancient world, you remove the biological necessity to strictly enforce that ceiling of dominance. The polygenic traits that were always encoded in our DNA, the cooperative advantage, the spectrum of fluid attraction, finally have the environmental safety to be expressed openly. We aren't seeing a new trend in human behavior. We are simply watching a highly advanced social bonding mechanism, one that evolution kept safely locked in our DNA for hundreds of thousands of years, finally step into the light now that we have stopped fighting just to survive and started learning how to live.